Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Galactic Core Podcast. Lovely to see you here all on this lovely Sunday afternoon. What a week it has been for Star Wars. The finale of Andor has just happened, and it has ended what has been one of the most epic series that we've got in Star Wars TV. You follow that on with Rogue One. I don't know about you guys, but after I watched Andor, I watched Rogue One as well, and it just changes the dynamics of stuff so much. We're going to get into that in a bit. I, of course, have an amazing guest to sit and chat with me. So before I announce that, though, you can obviously see it on screen anyway. It's not like you can't see there's another person on screen. But if you're not following the Galactic Cod Podcast, please jump onto YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you're hitting the follow button, the subscribe button. You can get every episode. You can jump on YouTube and Spotify and everywhere else and just see every episode that I've got. There's been some great episodes in there. Last year's May the 4th special with the Voice of Cities was absolutely amazing, discussing the best scenes in all of Star Wars. 2-year anniversary happened last month. 5 different podcasts came on and we just had fun with Marvel, Star Wars quizzes, everything. I won the Star Wars quiz as I bloody well should be. So that was all fun and games, but make sure you're jumping on there. But my guest this week, this podcast has been on the show before, and it was my highest viewed episode that I've ever had. For controversial reasons, probably, because it was the finale of Acolyte. That's the show in itself. So a lot of funny comments I'm getting. I still harp on. I love the comment that says I'm a paid Disney shill. If that was the case, the collection behind me would be a lot bigger if I was paid by Disney. Let's put it that way. But fantastic to have just the one of them back on today rather than all three. But please welcome from the Bitches Of Dathomir Podcast, it's Jen. How are we doing, Jen?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure to have you back on. How's the show going? How are you ladies getting on with it?
Oh, it's been great. I think last time that we were on, it was me, Rachel, and Frankie. Frankie has since retired from podcasting. She's got a very busy work life and regular life. So just me and Rachel now, but it's been fantastic. And we still get to hang out with Frankie on the regular, which is great.
That's lovely. I mean, not nice that she. I mean, I guess nice for her that she's retired, but not nice for you guys and the fact that she doesn't get to do the show with you anymore.
I know,
I'd be devastated. So. But at least you still get to hang out, and you guys got to go and do something fantastic in sort of last month, wasn't it? So you got to go to Star Wars Celebration in Japan. Very, very jealous. I imagine in Japan it's absolutely amazing. I got to go to the UK one 2 years ago. In fact, my first ever episode of this podcast, I covered Star Wars Celebration because it came out the week after. So I had someone on that was there as a cosplayer and is like a big social media sort of UK Star Wars person. So I know what it's like to get to a celebration and do it. But you guys are like another level because you could do cosplay and everything like that along with it. I just turned up as myself and just sort of like lost myself in Star Wars for the day. Because it was around the time when obviously we had season 1 of Andor as well. So there was like a massive group of people dressed as like the prisoners from Narkina 5. And they literally went from one end of the venue to the other, chanting "One Way Out," and then like went out the exit. It was at the same time the Ahsoka trailers dropped as well, so that was what was going on when I was there. What was it like for you?
So funny you mentioned the Andor thing because that group was actually back again. I have a video that I'll keep forever of them running through saying "No Way Out." Like, I love that it repeated itself again. What perfect timing! But it was fantastic. I think it's so easy as a Star Wars fan to forget that there are real fans, not just online, you know? And so when you get to meet fans in person, face to face, it's such a cool and different experience. Everyone was just so excited to be there in general, because it's obviously a huge privilege to be able to go to Japan for Star Wars. And just the excitement and the hype for all things that were announced and all things that are to come was amazing.
What was the biggest highlight for you of your time there?
Oh gosh, I went to a panel that was featured Mads Mikkelsen and Sam Witwer and Manny Jacinto.
Ooh.
And it was such a fantastic panel because we got to talk to each of these people individually about what are very different characters they've played in the Star Wars universe. And there was something really special about Manny's segment for me. It was super emotional, and I think it was really important to me that he sees Star Wars fans be supportive of him and what he's done in real life, because I'm sure you know that's not been the case online. So seeing him kind of get emotional at people clapping and cheering and stuff, I don't know. That to me was just something super special, and kind of at the core of Star Wars is just all this love for the universe, and I love that he got to be there for that. So
amazing. I've got to see some pictures online of some of the cosplays that went on during the time there. What goes into doing that kind of thing, and how it can't be easy to take all that stuff with you when you got to fly to somewhere like Japan as well. Like luggage costs must be through the roof for you guys.
Oh man. So I am the least qualified of all of us to talk about it. This was actually my first time ever cosplaying. Rachel is the cosplay expert, and a bunch of people in our group cosplay on the regular. I only had one outfit to pack, and it was all like, I didn't have anything too big and crazy, and I'm lucky I have like a flight special thing, so I get 2 check bags for free, and it's great. So I don't have any problems with that portion of it. I saw some people's outfits and was like, how did you physically get to Japan? I don't know how you pack all that stuff. And Rachel and Steph both had 3 separate outfits, which I'm not ever going to be at that level, I don't think. So I have a lot of respect for anyone who cosplays in general. And now that I've experienced it, my respect is through the roof, because there's a lot that goes into it physically, financially, emotionally. So it was quite the experience.
Yeah, I'm not really a cosplayer myself. I did once own a Jedi robe, and that's about as far as I've ever got. So I mean, you can see all the helmets behind me, and I'm never gonna like dress up properly as one of them. They're just for show for me. So the respect I have for the people that do dress up and that put the effort into it is absolutely unreal. To be fair, I think my favourite one that I saw was the Rancor cosplay. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that's from the Rise of the Glove Shitter podcast. If you go and like look at her profile, Dash Rebo on Instagram, she makes all of these herself, and the ones she comes up with are so creative. It's never like, no shame against it, but it's not like she's dressing as Padme. You see 500 Padmes, like they're always beautiful and amazing, but you'll look and you'll see Steph, and it's like she does Max Rebo and she does a Rancor, and she just does stuff that's so unique and different, and it was really fun for me to watch people's reactions to her, and to Frankie, who played her keeper, of course. It was so fun. Everybody just light up and laugh when they saw them. So.
Is amazing. I mean, yeah, I remember like obviously the amount of people that cosplay is unreal. I just literally showed up in like a Star Wars t-shirt and just watching everyone, and like I just remember before we walking for the arena, there was like where sort of everyone coming from both sides before they get to the main walkway to go into the arena, and there was a group of guys just stood there all dressed as like 501st clones, like someone dressed as Rex, Echo, Fives, and whatever, and I was just like, this is the start of my day, and I get to see the best ones at the start, and then you go and just see what everyone else is doing throughout the whole day, and it's absolutely unreal. It really is. Just the effort
it's mind blowing.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm never going to have that level of dedication to an outfit to do that, and so I seriously admire them all for doing for it. But what other bits did you get to go and see whilst you were there? Obviously, lots of stalls and stuff like that. Because I walked away with a few, like the holocrons I've got just above my head here. I got them from Celebration because they're from Galaxy's Edge, and I'm not going to get out to Galaxy's Edge anytime soon. So I'm like quite grateful that I managed to get them from there. I mean, is there any good souvenirs you picked up?
Oh man, I got quite a bit of clothes. I think this is one of them. Nice. Yeah. So for me, it was mostly clothing. I'm not a huge, I don't do toys or collectibles, and a lot of people do. There were lines just forever. It felt like for days for those things. So I love how much people love that kind of thing as well. But for me, it's more the merch situation, because I'm going to use that all the time and every day, and that's kind of more my thing. I did buy some Japanese books because they have a little bookstore set up at Celebration, and I was like, I have to get at least one book in Japanese, so I'm going to make a very sad attempt at some point to read that. We'll see how it goes.
Well, one thing I wondered, with it being sort of Star Wars Celebration Japan, was the reaction to maybe something like Visions out there, because obviously it's lots of different Japanese and obviously I'm guessing other Asian creators as well, not just, I don't think all of them are Japanese, are they? But obviously it's a big thing out there for them with the anime and manga and stuff like that. So did you get to see anything like that with like the reaction? Because obviously they announced Volume 3 of Visions during that time, didn't they? And obviously a couple of clips of it. And I can only imagine like what it would have been like to maybe be in the room at a panel when they're announcing that in Japan.
Yeah, I think it was cool to see this. I don't know how it was with London. It certainly was not like this in Anaheim at all, but it was so interesting to see this huge sort of mashup between Japanese culture and Star Wars. It was so much more obvious than anything that would ever happen, you know, in California or anywhere else. There were, you know, costumes that were Star Wars, but they were Japanese inspired, and it was so cool to see. My favorite, you know, cosplay things that I saw were of that style, like a samurai Darth Vader, which was the coolest thing I've ever seen. There was a geisha Queen Amidala. It was just spectacular, and so it was fun to be able to, I guess, return Star Wars to the culture that inspired it, and then to get to see them like come together and see how excited people from Japan that came to Celebration were to be a part of this when normally they can't always fly over to, you know, the U.S. and we have to come over here. So it was just so much fun to see that and to see how passionate people in Japan are about Star Wars. It's a good reminder that Star Wars is literally for everyone all over the world. And I think we get trapped in our little bubbles sometimes and forget that. So I wish I had been in person at the manga one when they announced all of that, or at Visions. I wasn't at either of those, and I wish I had been, because there were some really cool announcements. But people were so hyped about that, and I
Yeah, I'm glad I've got to go to at least one, because obviously it comes to Europe every like 8 years, or I think like 2016 was maybe the last time they were in Europe. And so I'm glad I got to go to one, because it is just amazing. You just walk in and I couldn't stop smiling all day, because it's just, you know, you're in Star Wars land essentially. But 2027, Los Angeles, 50-year anniversary. Like, you've got to be going to that, surely.
I am. I am very, very super lucky. I am in the area and won't have to pay so much money for travel like other people have to, or like I had to do for Japan. So I was not expecting that at all, since it was in Anaheim fairly recently. So it was a shock for me and a shock for Rachel. We were there when they announced it. We both just like screamed and lost our minds because I couldn't believe they were coming to Los Angeles. I am very excited. I will 100% be there in some capacity. So hopefully other people are going to get to too.
I mean, I'm guessing because like George Lucas Skywalker Ranch is based out near California, isn't it? So I'm guessing really you can call California or somewhere around there the home of Star Wars in a way. So it probably makes sense. 50th anniversary. Like, I can only imagine the stuff they're going to, because obviously they're skipping next year. I guess they're going to do every 2 years from now on rather than every year. So yeah, 50th anniversary, 2027 Los Angeles. I think that's going to be off the chain. If I win the lottery between now and then, I'll be there. Apart from that, I'm probably unlikely I'll get to go out to it. So I'll have to wait and see if it pops it back over to Europe or somewhere near me in Europe anytime soon. So, but at least I got to go to one. That's, I can say I've been to one at least, and it was amazing. So I still remember though, no matter how good all the costumes and stuff are from all the different like various characters, it's still a thrill to get your picture taken with like an original. Because like probably my favorite picture, I got one. There was an amazing, like, it looked so real, Darth Vader costume, and there was like a hallway scenery set up, and there was just this Darth Vader guy, and there was like a moving, beeping, all sort of cogs working R2-D2 as well, and that just strolled up and stood beside Vader whilst people were walking up and asking for pictures, and I was like, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. I like just jumped in. I like pushing kids out the way, like, get out the way. I'm getting in for this picture, and I'm like, please take a photo. So,
there's something, it transports you back to being a kid for sure, regardless of kind of which generation you're in. And so even beyond seeing, you know, I think for me, seeing original characters is obviously amazing, but for a lot of people, it's just when you see your favorite character in whichever show or movie that's in, it just makes you feel like a kid again. And to me, that's kind of what Star Wars is.
Yeah, it's just the natural excitement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being that we're Star Wars fans and getting together, something like that. So absolutely amazing. I'm so thrilled you got to go to that. I am jealous, to be fair, going because Japan's on the bucket list to go to anyway, and getting Japan and Star Wars celebration in the two birds in one. So absolutely amazing.
I know. I promise I am the most grateful, and there was a lot of budgeting.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, even more jealous that you're pretty much going to be able to walk into Star Wars Celebration in 2027.
I know. I feel bad about it, but not enough time.
No, you shouldn't feel that bad about it. To be fair, I mean, we jumped on the train because it was being held in London. I'm about like 2 hours away by train.
Oh my gosh!
So it's
awesome.
not too bad. I mean, it's a little bit, but we did it all in one day. So we went up in the morning. Did obviously you got to walk around all day and stuff, and then we got the train back in the evening time. So so it's a lot to do it all in one day. But still, I wouldn't have done it any other way because unfortunately, I'm not a rich person. I couldn't afford to buy an entire weekend pass or because the Jedi Master VIP tickets for like 3 days and stuff. They were like £1,000 and stuff. So I was just like, I can't do that.
I'm gonna try to do that for the first time but I'm gonna justify it by saying since I'm not spending money on a plane ticket or hotels, that all that money can just go to that instead of like my rent or my food or my healthcare. So that's the way we're gonna do it.
Skip healthcare payments for a couple of months. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
It'll be fine. I'll just fuck it up.
But amazing. Star Wars Celebration is such a good thing. I'm glad that we do get to do these types of things because there's nothing else like it, to be fair, that I've been to and stuff. So, but we are here to talk about one thing in particular, which is Andor. So the last 3 episodes of Andor, this show has been so up and down for me because I felt the same about season 2 as I did season 1, which is like the first half of it. I was just like, I'm not totally into this. Like it's maybe a bit too slow for me. I need a bit more, and then it ramps up, and then you get like some of the best stuff out of it, and some of the best speeches, and quite possibly some of the most important characters in Star Wars now. We'll get into a debate later, but there are just some people already debating like who's more important to the rebellion, like Luthen or Luke Skywalker and stuff like this. And I'm like, well, it's all various things, bits and pieces, but we do have some. We do have some of the most important people in Star Wars now have come out of this show. So before this week's episodes, how were you feeling about the season so far? Because obviously, like I said, I thought it was a bit slow, 1 to 6, or maybe even 1 to 5. 6 was a bit better. Obviously, last week's episodes were phenomenal. The Gorman massacre and then the extraction from the Senate. Obviously, the time jumps have maybe sort of thrown it around a bit as well because there's not much time to dwell on the previous episodes because they're just moving on to a new thing. So how have you been feeling about it before the finale episodes?
What I'll say is like cinematography, acting, costumes, all of that is just spectacular. I was blown away every episode by the artisticness of this show. I think they did such an amazing job with that. All the actors were fantastic. The writing's amazing. Like tone-wise, for me, I'll be honest. I think I've realized in watching this show through 2 seasons that Star Wars being kind of an escape for me is really important. And so I think shows like this, which is like I live in America. This is kind of the reality, that we're experiencing. It's a little harder because it almost takes you out of the Star Wars universe and into your own. So I think for me that was a tough watch, and I think it's a necessary watch. I think people need to see things like this and accept the reality of situations that happen in the real world. But I think for me it's one where I'm like, I'm always going to appreciate what Andor has done for Star Wars, and it's brought about so many important things. And I saw some of the most, pivotal moments I think we'll ever see in Star Wars in this show. I don't know that I would consider it like a favorite just because of that aspect of it. I think I need to be in a separate universe sometimes, and this is a little too close to home almost. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I get what you mean. Obviously, I'm not American, but the situation over there right now is plain to see. Some of the mirroring it in Andor is absolutely. I understand where you're coming from on that front. So, but we get to this week's episodes. Coming into this week, I was like, there isn't that much of Andor or Cassian's story to really tell. His kind of story is just done, and it's just setting him up for Rogue One. So this was always for me. I coming into it going, it's all going to be about the side characters and wrapping up their stories. It's probably one of the criticisms I've had of this season is we haven't really had much Cassian. It's a show called Andor. In season 1, there was a lot of Cassian. In season 2, it's been more about the rebellion than anything else, which is fine because what in a way like the Mandalorian, the first 2 seasons were maybe about him, and then it broadens its horizons a bit to include a bit more Empire remnants, a bit more of the Mandalorians in general. And you can understand when a show starts getting through series, it starts expanding. It's not all about just the main person anymore. But still, I was like, maybe I wanted a bit more Cassian in this season. So going into this week, okay, it's all going to be about Luthen and Clea. It's going to be about Dedra and her situation, and then Mon Mothma and the rebellion. So that's, for me, what was going on. So like Cassian was almost wrapped up in the fact that he's got to the stage where he's committed to the rebellion. Bix left him for so he can fulfill his destiny with the rebellion. So he's all in now with the rebellion, and that was granted then. So he's got nothing else really to do apart from do his bit. And so this episode all about Luthen. So kicking off very dramatically with the reveal that Lonnie knows about the Death Star and he's found all that information, going through Dedra's stuff, goes to meet Luthen, tells him all about it, and he's like, I need to get out. And poor Lonnie, he's done everything that Luthen have asked of him for the last 4 years. He stayed on the inside, he's constantly given the information, he's misdirected from the inside, and he's done everything that he could do for the rebellion, and he should have been got out and got to Yavin 4, but Luthen being Luthen, brutal. Because I will probably mention it lots throughout the series, but Luthen's whole mantra of, and what he's obviously said before as well, where he's like, we either win or we die. Those are the only 2 options. But to take out Lonnie and leave him dead on a park bench, I don't think Lonnie deserved that. What do you reckon?
I don't think he deserved it. I knew it was going to happen. I feel like, being a Star Wars fan, I feel like we can detect the red flag of death pretty early. And so I feel like the first time we ever met him, I was like, well, see you later, buddy. At some point. I think it's, as much as I'm like, he deserves to live, I do like when they do this with characters, though, because I think it's very easy in Star Wars to go, like, good guy, bad guy, and I think all the interesting stuff is in between. And Luthen is very much a, like, oh, God, I don't know if I'm supposed to, like him or not, that kind of thing. And I think if he had let him live, it would have been like, oh, okay, so yeah, he's just a good guy now. And that's just not the reality in the situation that he's in. He made what he thought was the right choice. It was a terrible choice, but I think for his character, it made him more interesting to go that route. Sorry, Lonnie.
I mean, yeah, like you said, we could detect the hint of death around the character pretty early on, and it was unlikely Lonnie was ever going to make it through. But yeah, he could have got him out. He could have just let him, because he's got a family, wife and a daughter. He kind of, it was a bit harsh, definitely, I think. So, but obviously, he's got the information now. He shares it with Clea, and they have that moment where one of them has to go back to the shop and erase all the equipment. Claire's like, I can do it, I'm faster. And Luthen's like, no, because he got that feeling that they're going to catch up with him. So he's like, no, you get out of here. Obviously goes to the shop. Why answer the door when they buzz it? Like, if you're in the middle of destroying your spy equipment and the doorbell rings, why bother to go out and answer it? Just carry on doing what you're doing. But obviously Dedra's waiting for him. They come in, they have this weird little but fun exchange about talking about the antiquities and stuff. Before she obviously reveals that she's got an old radio. I think it was from the start of season 1, wasn't it? The one that he gets from Cassian or something. So nice little tie up there. She's obviously overstepping her bounds because she's not supposed to be doing this. She's not supposed to be going after Axis, but she's obviously had enough, and she's like, this has been my work for the last, apart from Gorman, this has been my work for the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm going to see this through regardless. They have that little exchange, and it was a great little exchange as well in terms of just the banter almost back and forth between them. And she's like, you're not going to escape. I've got you now. And he's just like, the rebellion's gone. It's not even here anymore. It's out there in the galaxy. And he's like, you're going to be disgusted from loads of different places. So Like, what you are is done now, essentially. You can't catch us, you can't stop it. Because it's great to see that, whilst Luthen has always been like, we're doing this ourselves sort of attitude, isn't he? And even said in like the other week or two, he's like, I've just lost track of everything. There's too much going on, too many threads, I can't keep track of it all. But the rebellion has obviously evolved. And I think he got to that point where he kind of accepted it, because obviously Andor had left him 2 years ago to side with the Alliance rather than him. But it's nice to see that whilst he's still kind of doing stuff himself, and he's like, I treat him as the father of the rebellion now, because it was him that sort of set everything up with Mon Mothma and Saw and whatever. Even though he's kind of closer to Saw in terms of the way he goes about things, maybe than the Alliance. He's just set everything up, and he's accepted now. He's like, the rebellion's out there. It's bigger than just me now. You've got the people on Yavin. You've got other cells spread across the galaxy. The rebellion's out there now, and it's started, and you are screwed because of that. And then obviously Dedra makes the mistake of leaving him alone with a ceremonial knife and tries to off himself.
Yep, I knew. I was like, Dedra, what are you doing? He's definitely going to do this. I think I saw a poll on Instagram or somewhere about this where they were like, how do you think Luthen's going to go out? And I definitely picked that he was going to do it. It just made so much sense to me that would be the way he wants to go, is in his own control. And I think he wanted this last moment of making her realize that all this work she put into it didn't matter, because he was not the rebellion. He played this huge part in it, but his job was essentially done at that point. And I as hard as it was to see her, as sad as it is, I liked that she was forced to be there for this, to see that everything she did was for nothing. So.
Yeah, it is lovely to see that when that happens to the bad guys. Because of this situation this week, I've decided to wear my rebellion hat, because last week with the Gorman massacre, I wore my Empire hat on my episode, and I got some, not serious, but I got some backlash over it. So I was like, this week I'll be kind, I'll wear it, the Rebel Alliance hat instead. So even it out after last week. Yeah. So nice to see. Yes, nice to see the bad guys getting their comeuppance a little bit. So obviously Luthen is technically, survived in a way. They take him off to the hospital, and Claire rocks up, and she's like, I know what I have to do. So we get these flashbacks of Luthen when he's younger, in some sort of military force. I haven't seen anywhere it's confirmed what that force was, whether it was Empire or local militia or whatever. But he finds a young Claire. Rumours start flying almost immediately that could have been Cassian's sister. But Tony Gilroy debunked that straight away and went no. But it would have been maybe an interesting way of going about it, of having them both there sort of around each other for the last 4 or 5 years and not even known it, whilst they're fighting the same battle from different angles. But so we get to see a bit of Luthen, with her, and it was always funny when she's like, am I your daughter now? And he's like, when the situation warrants it, yes. So he's like, either that, you're here to do what you're told. Yeah. Obviously, the flashbacks teaching her how to rebel and how to go about things and how to not be obvious and not be caught about it, which is cool to see. But it does show the bond and the evolution of Luthen at the same point and how he sets things up. Nice to see Naboo very quickly as well, just throwing that in there, because I went straight away, I was like, oh, that's Naboo. But how do you like the flashbacks? Because I'm not always a fan of flashbacks. It's not something Star Wars has started doing until recently. I think maybe even Acolyte was the first time that they did it, in terms of proper flashbacks. Although I guess Mandalorian had a couple to back when he was a kid.
Mandalorian had a couple. Rise of Skywalker had some very brief ones. But yeah, it's not historically been really a thing that Star Wars does. I kind of liked it. I mean, it all depends on how you go about it, obviously, but I enjoyed getting this little, it was so brief, like so little flashbacks, but it gave us so much meat into their relationship and how they got to where they are now. And so I enjoyed it, and I think it was another sort of hitting, the nail with the hammer of, this is not an entirely good thing that they're doing. And they show that by, showing a child being in Naboo for what is, a bombing. It's a terrible situation. It's this really sad moment that is done for what are, the right reasons in this universe. And I think it just, again, hits home that this is not an all good or bad thing. And I like that they showed Clea learning that through Luthen.
Yeah. And obviously, whilst Luthen's lying in the hospital, Dedra's Dedra's getting her ass handed to her essentially because they come and arrest her for going out of place and doing this whole raid in the first place. And so yeah, she gets arrested. But the best bit about all of this was Claire turns into a badass that we didn't even know that she was. She infiltrates this hospital by herself, and to the point where the Imperialists think that it's like a 3-man team that's doing this. A trained 3-man team, where she just did it individually, took the dementia grandma with her. She's like, "You've got a daughter upstairs, I'm going to use you," which is amazing. And the alien's just like, which made me laugh, to be honest, when I was watching it. But she infiltrates, gets up to the floor, sets off a distraction bomb, and then manages to go in, says goodbye to Luthen, and obviously disconnects his life support. And we see him obviously pass away. And then it did something that it hasn't really done when like characters have died in Star Wars before, whereas it just showed the shot of Luthen obviously lying on that bed, and it just focused on him for what, a good like 10-15 seconds before like fading out of the screen. In Star Wars, like, you don't see many main character deaths in Star Wars. Everyone seems to survive almost everything, apart from the bad guys. And so to, like, do that, and it was, like, to me, that was the poignant bit of going, this is the father of the rebellion. Let's show a bit of respect to him and his passing.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I did want to mention with Leia, I think the point of people suddenly sort of realizing she's badass, I think a lot of people picked up on that way before, but that's the whole point, is that in Star Wars, so often it's been, it's the people wielding lightsabers, it's the people that are out front. Those are the heroes. Those are who everybody knows are amazing and badass. And with Andor, you've gotten to see all these more quiet characters, these characters on the sidelines, these characters who are very normal people, actually end up being the ones who play such important roles. And so Claire sort of being this quiet but important presence for so much of Andor, and then us finally getting to see why she's so amazing and important was great. I'm so glad they showed that so that it became more obvious to people who she was, because I feel like I always sensed that, and it was so nice to finally see it.
I was just thinking in terms of badass and the fact that she infiltrated everything on her own, and she's given like one-shot headshots to troopers and just nailing them absolutely out the way. And I was just like,
no hesitation.
Yeah, absolutely. She's like, damn, that's just wiped out and move on to the next one. So
there were many moments during this final sort of 3-season arc that I was like, oh my gosh, Star Wars just did that.
It was absolutely fantastic, to be fair. But R.I.P. Luthen, Father of Rebellion, passes on. And then we move on to Claire's back in that sort of flat that they've all sort of populated over the course of this season on Coruscant. That absolute shithole. She's got stuff buried all around this flat in terms of supplies, like Morse code machines. Everything is just like hidden away in this flat as like emergency. So she's obviously sending like Morse code messages out there to try and let them know that they need extraction. Cassian, K2, and Melshi go off, come to Coruscant, and they obviously go and get her in the flat. But then we've got this ISB raid team that are obviously closing in as well with is it Miro, was it the ISB supervisor? This is then obviously one of the best moments, because you've got the ISB team and you've got like the ISB boss. What is his where is my notes with his name on? Padagast, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, thank you. It's like I can feel it on my mouth.
I can't see where this bloody hell is it. His name's on my notes. Where the hell is it gone?
Padagast, but
there he is. Partagaz. That's it.
So close.
As these episodes have gone on, he's got more and more nervous, isn't he? Because just things like just don't seem to be in his control much anymore. And so we get obviously they've gone and met up with Claire, and they're obviously talking about everything. Luthen's passed away. There's this serious information. We've got to get to the rest of the rebellion about what's going on with the Emperor's energy program, which is complete bollocks. And then obviously the raid tries to happen, but one droid, should I say, comes to the absolute rescue. K2. Funny as hell as always, even in killing other people, he's funny. It's like, are you with us? No, SWAT. And just body slams them all.
One of the scenes that'll like forever stick with me is him holding the body of that one officer as a shield that he didn't even need, and I was like, what?
Yeah, that was it. Miro, whatever his name was, and he's just holding him up like.
Yeah,
as he's getting shot at. That was absolutely amazing.
it
And
was
then just body
insane.
slams each of them. Yeah, amazing K2 to the rescue. Because obviously it was a bit weird that Cassian had been trying to convince Claire to come to Yavin, and she didn't really want to go. Like, it just shows how separated her and Luthen have been from maybe the growing rebellion alliance and how separate they were from it all. But and he's like, "Don't you want to come and see what you've set up essentially, what you started, what everything has evolved to now be? It's not just you guys and a few secret agents against the world anymore. There's more to it." And for some reason, she was like, "Nah," until she gets knocked out, and then he's like, "You got no choice, they're coming."
Yeah. And I feel like her and Luthen, had this little setup and they were both under control of it. And it's so hard to imagine now, if you're going to go join this other thing, you don't have control of it anymore. And so I think probably that's where she was coming from, is just like, I don't think I can deal with the loss of control of this. And obviously she doesn't have a choice now, and she's going to have to learn.
And then we get the interrogation of Dedra by, of all people, Krennic. Brilliant to see Krennic coming back. And he's obviously pissed. He thinks she's a rebel spy because he's like, how did you get any of this information? Like, how do you know the name Galen Erso? How did you find out about any of this? Were you sleeping with Lonnie because you gave him access to your card and he used it for 3 hours last night? All this sort of stuff. And she acts both terrified and defiant almost at the same time, because he's like, "You're a scavenger," and she's like, "I've had to scavenge to get this information." And he's like, "How did you even get the information?" He's like, "Oh, well, some security packets were sent to me by mistake, and I kind of read them, but not all of them, but I kept it all anyway." And she's like, "I should have reported it straight away." It's like, "Well, too little, too late." And so, like, she everything is almost fallen into plan perfectly to almost have her set up to make them think that she's a spy. And Krennic's obviously not having any of it. What did you reckon?
I love Ben Mendelsohn so much. Fantastic actor. I loved everything that he did in this scene with Dedra. It was just, I was terrified for her, and then I was like, why? I don't like her at all. You know what I mean? Like, you don't feel any sympathy for this character. But in that moment, he was so terrifying with how threatening he was with her that I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So I thought it was just a brilliantly acted scene. She did such a good job of teetering between, I want to argue with you, but I am also horrified and afraid you're going to kill me at any moment. And I just thought it was all fantastically done.
Apparently, that moment when he like places his finger on top of her head and walks round her, improvised as they were doing it, according to Ben Mendelsohn. So that wasn't even in the script.
It's crazy because her face, like the look of like surprise and terror she had on her face, like it was so well done and so perfect for that moment. And that's, I think, the screenshot in my mind I can see when I think of that scene is her face with his finger on her head.
I think the older I've got, the more that you learn that how much improvisation there is in scenes sometimes, in terms of, it's not just about, memorizing lines and how good you deliver them. Obviously, the reaction to people as they're talking to you and giving lines, but then those little moments where someone decided to improvise something and like, you could have easily messed up that take and had to redo it, and then it wouldn't be a surprise anymore. But to then react perfectly to it as well is sometimes I don't think that people get enough credit in acting for doing that.
100%.
Because sometimes it goes too far in terms of like they give them a bit too much leeway with improvisation, and then you're like, this hasn't really worked out. Like, I think Thor: Love and Thunder, perfect example of that. But yeah, great to see that sort of improvisation, but just the fear that she's got. And I saw a great meme that's what the Qui-Gon, there's always a bigger fish quote, and it showed that you go from Cyril to Dedra to Pendergast, to Krennic, to Vader, to Palpatine. It's like everything goes up the line. Because I'm going to mention it now rather than at the end, but obviously Pendergast kills himself at the end because he knew about the Death Star, as we see through a couple of conversations with Krennic, and he's obviously being held accountable for the fact that Dedra knew and found out, and the information has been leaked. And he's was being called to a meeting, presumably with Vader or Palpatine. I would assume, and he was going to get his ass handed, and rather than like be thrown in prison or suffer whatever wrath force choked by Vader, maybe he's just like, I'd rather go out on my own terms, and he's listening to that monologue by Nemec from season 1.
Oh my god!
And he just asks
What
for
a
a minute.
moment!
Yeah. And beautifully acted in the fact that the guy that is obviously summoned to get him, I can't remember his name either, but he goes out into the hallway with the 2 stormtroopers, and you just hear the blaster go, and the stormtroopers react, and he's just like, no, just give it a minute. Just let the dude die in peace for 1 second.
Oh my god!
And so half the ISB get wiped out in these last few episodes. So bless them, the poor ISB there, just thinking that they were doing what they needed to do.
And it brought up so many fun conversations that are, again, very relevant to like what we're experiencing in America and what other people have experienced in other political regimes, which is that you never think it's going to turn on you when you're a part of it, and it always does. In some way or another, it's always going to, and Dedra thought that she was in the clear and she was safe in this environment, and now she's realizing she's not, and Patagas also figures that out and is like, I'm going to go ahead and exit this before that happens.
I think it brought up a good point for me is the fact that when a lot of the ISB officers we've seen in this series, they all hide behind the superiority complex of the Empire in terms of when they're dealing with each other, when they're giving orders, barking orders to those below them. They're very much arrogant. They're in command. They're like, you will do what I say. But when comes down to the deep shit and the stuff that they have to face, they absolutely crumble. Like we saw at the end of season 1, the uprising of Ferrix, that Dedra had gone along and then she crumbled and had to be saved by Cyril. She absolutely crumbled again at the Gortman massacre, and anytime that she's faced with it, she crumbles, and it seems that all of them do. And so it's just interesting to see how much they hide behind the superiority of the Empire for their own and their own superiority complexes that it's given them, and the fact that they think they're invincible and they're in charge, but when it comes down to the real action, they crumble so quickly. It's unreal. It's really always hit home for me a good point for that. So I love that they get to show that and go, yep, these people are in charge and they think they're the bee's knees and the dog's bollocks and the top of the chain, but as soon as someone above them comes crashing down to them, they all fucking absolute disasters. So after that, we jump back to Yavin. Obviously, Cassian and everyone else they've landed. Again, another funny moment when Draven's just like, "You droid," and he's like, "Yes," coming out the ship. But obviously, they've grounded Cassian. Clay is recovering, and we get this moment when Andor gets to chat to the Alliance Council. He's obviously relayed the information to them. Half of them don't believe it because they just don't believe it. Half of them don't believe it because it's come from Luthen, and they're like questioning Luthen's credibility here. And it's just like, oh my god, you lot are so annoying. Especially like I can't remember his name either because he's just like we see him in Rogue One as well. He's just like mouthing off and saying, "Oh, this is preposterous!" Rah. Like I want to slap that dude so hard in the face. It's just so annoying. It's like you're a senator with obviously we've never really heard of you anyway, so you can't be that important. But then you've just got preposterous, just sort of arrogance going on about you. And do you know what this whole conversation, the vibes it gave me? It gave me Jedi Council vibes in terms of the arrogance and just the fact that they just deny everything and don't believe it. It gave me the whole. The Sith could possibly never have returned without us knowing about it. There's not been any Sith for a millennia. They couldn't have returned without us knowing about it. And that was the whole vibe of, this energy product can't be a lie. We've been voting for it. We would know something's been going on. We would know if there was a super weapon being developed. And it's like, you lot are unbelievable. You're really pissing me off right now. Because I hate the Jedi Council with a passion. They really piss me off so much. And this lot gave me the exact same vibes.
And it's not just the Jedi Council, too. It's like, why did the Republic fail? And it's like this. This is literally why both the Republic and the Jedi Council ended up failing, is because of this kind of attitude that we see. And I think that was purposeful. I mean, to show that it's never perfect. I did love this scene. There was so much good tension in it, so much good acting and writing. It was great.
But then just the fact that they question, obviously, it coming from Luthen, this whole story, and then just... Because obviously they see him as maybe closer to being like Saw rather than themselves, which obviously is maybe true as well, but the fact that Cassian then has a go at them. Draven's trying to keep him in his place, and he's just like, Cassian's just not having it. He's just like, no. Like, did any of you know him? Like, the reason I'm so sure of this is because I don't just know the good, I know the bad, so I know when he's out of place. And he even says it's what drove me to leave him 2 years ago and end up with you lot. So he's like, I know him inside and out. I know the good and the bad, so I know that this is true. He wouldn't have, like, done this otherwise. And I just love that. I don't have the quote word for word, but when he's just like, you lot sitting here with these decisions, is like, you lot have sacrificed a fraction of what he sacrificed for this rebellion. And like, you just see that hit home a little bit with them. But Bale here annoyed me as well. I didn't expect Bale to be so like up against it all, and even he's just like, oh, so when was the last time you saw Luthen then? If you're so like matey with him, and he's like, well, actually, it was a year ago when he told me to save Senator Mothma, and he's like, okay, duly noted, fair enough.
Yeah, we've seen this with Bale before. He kind of plays the like middle ground. I think a lot of times he tries to sort of be on the fence and like mediating between people, and he never quite picks a hard side, at least that we've seen from him up until a certain point, until he really gets into the rebellion. But yeah, here he's just kind of, oh, well, maybe devil's advocate over here, whatever, and it's like, Bale, you're not contributing anyway to this.
Yeah, I just didn't expect him to, because I've loved Bale and every appearance he's ever had in Star Wars and everything he stands for, and he's maybe just as responsible for setting up part of the rebellion, because obviously he's funded a lot of it, of what the Alliance anyway. But you know, he set up things early doors with like the Fulcrum system and stuff like that, and obviously bringing a lot of it together, and as we said, funding a lot of it. And him and Leia have been working non-stop for years with it, so he's maybe just as responsible. But yeah, just that whole scene got me in terms of like Cassian was so spot on. Like, you lot have sacrificed a fraction of what Luthen did, and what I have done too as well to get to this point. And they're like, oh, fine, it's okay. Yeah, we'll kind of just like... But they still don't really accept the information. Which, when you then watch Rogue One, and they crap themselves when they do get the information from the pilot, and they're like, okay, maybe we should have paid attention to this a bit sooner.
Yeah.
But then the rest of, like, these episodes is just basically tying up the loose ends and setting everything up, really. So it's nice to see that, obviously... him, Cassian and Vel get their little moment together, and they're like, will you drink for Luthen? Because obviously Mon Mothma wasn't sure and asked Vel to go out there. And doesn't she tell him as well that he should go and find Bix? And he's just like, what? Like, she left me in the middle of the night. Like, I'm just not... there's no need to do that now. I don't need that.
I know, that whole scene, like, hurt my soul. I was like, oh, God.
And then obviously, like... I can't remember his name now. I watched it a few days ago. But the dude that Cassian meets at the start of Rogue One, Tivik.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's been messaging apparently loads, and he's like, "But I'm only going to speak to Cassian." And the more he messages, the more Draven and the rest are like, "Okay, there's something going down." Because obviously, we saw them have a chat with Saw over the hologram, and Saw's cameo appearances in this series have been kind of pointless for me. Because it's just to show that Saw's flying around. Because when we saw him like 2 weeks ago in his like in the half episode that he was in, like I know there was a little bit of point to it of just showing that he can convince people and he's doing his own thing. But if you'd have taken that out, it wouldn't have made any difference to this series. And then just him having that quick chat with the Alliance Council here was just to show, I think, the odds that they're at in terms of the way that Saw wants to do things, the way that the Alliance do things. And just bitching. He's like, you don't know where to find me. And he's like, well, actually, we know you're on. We know you're on. Oh God, I can't remember the name of it now. Jeddah. That's it. Yeah. He's like, we know you're on Jeddah. And he's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't know where I am. And he's like, yeah, you're on Jeddah. We know where you are.
Okay, but the memes that have come out of this are worth it. You know.
But yeah, it was just like, if he'd have taken all of like Saw's stuff out of this series, it wouldn't really have made any difference. It's not like he made him. To me, this last episode was just. Put as many Rogue One cameos as you possibly can into this just to tie it in, since it's effectively 15 minutes later is Rogue One. So, but you even see that with like the radio operator and all these sorts of bits and pieces. But again, we get a funny K2 bit when he's like waking up Cassian, and he's just like waking up humans is always confusing. But the man you don't like is here to see you.
I love him so much.
Um, but with that bit with Cassian waking up, we obviously see that he's having a dream, and he's dreaming about his sister again. So this is something that I've discussed with a few people in terms of we start this season one off with the fact that Cassian's looking for his sister, and they seem to pretty much drop that arc fairly quickly through season one, and then just to throw in a bit very much at the end of this where they bring it up again. So a lot of people have been like, what was the point to it, or anything like that? And the only thing I could really think of to explain it, I don't know whether this is true or not, it's obviously just my own headcanon, is that they wanted to show us where he was at that point in his life at the start of season one. He's out there looking for his sister. He's fairly good at getting in and out of places and stealing things, and he's got the Empire sort of pegged. But he wants to do his own thing, but he wants to find his sister as well. And then that whole arc being dropped is just showing the fact that he was buying into what Luthen was doing, and he wants to be part of something bigger and to stop the oppression of the Empire, so to speak. And so that was the only thing I could personally think of as to why they would introduce that whole thing and then never touch it ever again, was to just show him getting drawn into the rebellion. Do you agree, disagree? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm definitely along the same lines. I took it as showing sacrifice. That was a huge theme of this entire series, obviously, is that people are sacrificing their entire lives for this thing. And I think it was kind of showing us this progression of, okay, well, he's looking for his sister, but now he's getting roped into this. And he loses Vix, which is like, the biggest part of his life. And he loses his best friend, earlier in the second season. And then at the very end, it's like he never wraps this up either. And so for me, that's how I took it, as look at all these things that Cassian ended up having to let go of in order for him to do what he is going to do in Rogue One. So that's how I took it. I understand why it seems it was dropped. I prefer to just assume it was intentional, because if you nitpick everything, you're going to find, stuff that's wrong always, and you can never fully wrap up that story. But that's kind of where I was going with it.
And they basically, Bale gives them permission to go off to the Rings of Kafrene to go and meet up with Tivik, which obviously then we're rolling to Rogue One. So the closing moments of this series, it's just showing basically what everyone's doing. So we see Krennic looking out over the Death Star with the radar, or the big dish missing, which obviously we see them putting in Rogue One. So it kind of tie up nicely. We see Saw looking out over the Star Destroyer that's over Jeddah. We see Dedra's been put in prison in Narkina 2 rather than Narkina 5. And as the lights go out, she bursts into tears, and it's kind of like poetic to see the fact that she's ended up in prison when it's a system that she supported her entire imperial life, and now that's where she's ended up. Well, presumably they've labelled her as a traitor. And even though we know that technically she isn't, she was trying to do everything that was best, but she defied orders, did something she wasn't supposed to do, and she's been pegged as a leak. So kind of like maybe Luthen's last revenge on her, in a way, is like, it makes me wonder then in the fact that she received a bunch of like information packets that she shouldn't have received about various things, and you're like, do you think that was influenced in the fact that she was sent those by Luthen or by Lonnie or something, like undercover? And knowing that she couldn't resist keeping hold of that information and putting it all together to realise what's going on, knowing that at some point down the line she would get pegged. She would get pegged as having that information, and therefore would then get pegged as a traitor. So
no, I think that's great. I love the thought of Lonnie like just slowly, putting all these little crumbs out for her that he knew she couldn't resist, and it ended up being her downfall.
And then we get, obviously, Cassian dressing up into his Rogue One gear, the slow-mo walk through Yavin 4, looking at everyone as he goes out. I did like the little poignant look he sort of has with the Force Healer from a couple of episodes ago, because she was very much on the nose, and the fact that I see you have a place to be and a message to send. Like, okay, thanks for that. That wasn't too on the nose about Rogue One at all. And then, obviously, he boards the U-Wing with K2 to go to the Rings of Kafrene, where we see him in Rogue One. But the very final scene of this show, I'm going to let you give your thoughts on this first, because I have a pointed opinion about this. So it ends with the fact that we go back to the planet we see at the start of the season. Someone has finally gone back to B2 after having left him alone for like 4 years. Bless him. That guy's got serious issues anyway with being left alone. So the fact that at least Bix went back to him. But we see a sort of shot that mirrors where Cassian and Jyn pass away in Rogue One, with Bix holding what obviously appears to be Cassian's baby. and showing that he has a son that she left him with, that he never knew about, is never going to get to know him because he's dead, and denied both of them of having a relationship. So, your thoughts on the final scene here, that Cassian has, well, I say a son, as a child.
Child, yeah, and that's interesting. When you said son, I was like, oh, this is a great thing to bring up because it's brought up a lot of interesting discussions. For one, everybody is assuming it's a boy, which we could go into an hour-long discussion on that and why that's irritating, I think, for a lot of people. But I like the message that it brings, which is that there's hope. That's, the main thing of Star Wars is that you should always have hope, and that's what's going to get you through. So I appreciated that portion of it. I think for me, and I don't want to down too much on it because I understand it just is what it is. But I think there were a lot of decisions made with Six in particular this season that I don't think were intentionally, misogynistic or whatever. But that's kind of how I read a lot of these decisions, is that so many things that they put her through or had her arc go through were more about furthering Cassian's story than furthering her story, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
and that happens a lot. That's happened a ton for a lot of female characters. They kind of just end up being the accessories that the male character needs to be where he needs to be. And so for me, that's kind of how that felt. I felt it was a little bit of it's sort of a cop out for me when it's just like, we don't know how to wrap up the woman's story. Let's just give her a baby. And again, I know that wasn't the intention of it. Like, it's been pretty obvious that Tony has so much respect for that character. And so I understand that wasn't the intention. That was kind of where it left me. So it wasn't my favorite decision, but a lot of people loved it. And a lot of people, it made them feel, happy and hopeful about maybe we'll see this, child in the future. So I think there were good things about it. I don't want to completely down on it. It is definitely not the choice for me, and that is okay. And other people enjoyed it, but that was my take on it.
I'm going to be down on it. I fucking hated it. This is such a cliche thing to do, and I really thought the Star Wars wouldn't do that. Like, we know you're going to die, or you're not with that person anymore. But they left you when they were pregnant, and so you've got a kid that you don't know about, and that kid's going to live on in your name, and they will avenge you one day. Like, if this kid turns up in the Thrawn movie and like turns around and goes, "I'm here. I'm 20 years old now. I'm here to help kick the remnants of the Empire in the name of my father." I mean, like, I'll get the fuck out. Like, if that happens, I'm gonna go nuts. But I just thought it was so cliche. It wasn't needed. Like, you don't need to, like, it almost in a way pissed me off to a point where I think it from my point of view, it almost damages the legacy of Cassian a little bit, because you're like, instead of giving Cassian his dues and the respect that his character deserves, because we know what happens to his character and how important he is to rebellion, you almost cheapen it a bit by going, here's a child to continue on. And it's just like, did you really need to do that? Like, Cassian's going to become a legend of Star Wars because of what he's done for the rebellion and what he did to get the Death Star plans. So to then add a random child into the fact after it really annoyed me. It really did. I just wasn't happy with that. And to that to be I know that's the whole thing about Star Wars is hope. Especially the original trilogy, it's about hope. Like, maybe the prequels and the sequels are a little bit different on that front in terms of the message that they give, but for the most part, the original trilogy is about hope. Especially that's the last bit of Rogue One. It's just like, what have we got here? And it's just Princess Leia and hope. So, mirroring the death scene from Rogue One with the fact that she's looking out into the sunset, and the clothes mirror sort of what they were wearing as well. So I understand from a certain point of view, but at the same point, I hated it with every fibre of who I was. And that being the last shot of the series as well. I know it's not the last time we ever see Cassian, because we do have Rogue One, but at the same point, I'm like, really? It just felt too much, especially when you do see him in Rogue One. It's not like that was the end of his story. Okay, he only lasts for another week, but in terms of the timeline. But I mean, I was so annoyed that this was the last thing that we get to see in this series. It should have ended with that walk through Yavin and just see him go off, because that's all you needed.
Yeah, Well, and I would have, the way you feel about it in terms of how it kind of cheapens Cassian's character is how I feel it does to Bix's character. So I completely understand and agree with where you're coming from. I think it would have been just as impactful for me if she had been standing by herself. So I thought it was an unnecessary addition, but I thought many of the decisions about her character were unnecessary for the sake of proving the Empire is bad. And it's like, oh no, we didn't know that before. There was a lot of that. I was unhappy with that character's handling this season. It doesn't mean I didn't enjoy anything about the show, but I was not super stoked about the ending.
No. And even with Bix as well, it's like I mean, you make some good points about the way that they use her character this season. It's more to further Andor than her, especially since there's like year-long time jumps in between, so you don't see the repercussions of anything that she's doing or how she deals with it to get to a better place each time we see her. At the same point, like, I'm not even sure you needed Bix in this season. Like, she obviously had an important role in season 1, and in a way, I almost feel like you're a bit like Saw Gerrera in a way, in the fact that you could have taken her out of this season and adjusted what Cassian was slightly doing it in those early episodes, and you didn't, and it wouldn't have made any difference to the main story. Like, Cassian could still have been like dedicated to the rebellion, and her leaving because she believed in like what the Foreseer was saying about he's got a destiny with the rebellion, and so therefore she's like, I made the decisions for both of us. I'm going to leave so you can do your thing because you want to leave right now and you can't do that if I'm still around. And I'm just like, that was cliche in itself as well.
Yeah. And I think they're uncomfortable discussions to have, and I know it's hard when I'm sure Tony hears feedback on very specific episodes and decisions, and the habit, I think, for most people is to try and defend or explain. And I think it's important instead that people listen. And I hope that he spends some time sort of reflecting on that character and what he did with her this season, and why it ever is a thing that we could have removed her from the season. It wouldn't have made a difference. Like, that shouldn't even be a thing, right? It's like, if you're going to add a character that's supposed to be so important, make her important. And so I'm upset by the thought that she could be removed and it wouldn't make a difference, because I hate that was the direction that he went with it. It's like, I agree she could have been taken out, and I hate that, because I think she could have been, this really cool character. She's a really strong character. She has a lot of, I think, personal morals and values that are really important to Star Wars, and it instead became more about how that affects Cassian than it was about her. And I just, I was not super stoked about what they did with Vix, and I think we need to talk about that, and I think we need to talk about how we handle women characters, and I definitely think we need to talk about the perpetuation of violence towards women in particular, and how that serves the plot or not. I have seen a lot of violence towards women in media. It happens a lot, and sometimes it's a necessary part of the story, and sometimes it's not. And in this season, there were a couple instances of this, not just with Vix, but with Dedra, where I was like, I don't know that this was a necessary part of the story, and I'm not sure why it was included. You know what I mean? And so it's a bummer that the thing people are going to remember most about Vix is that, she almost got assaulted by the Empire, and she had Cassian's baby. And I feel like those are the takeaways people are sort of getting from her character this season. And I just wanted to bring that up, because I think that's kind of an injustice to her character. And it's, but we're progressing in that arena. I think there's just still a lot of listening and talking that needs to happen about this, because so many of these themes are so deeply ingrained that people don't even realize they're supporting them, if that makes sense. And I mean, it goes back to the reason that baby is important to people is because it's a boy and it's Cassian seems to be sort of the theme I see emerging. And the reason people are assuming it's a boy is because that's the only way it would be important, right? And so I want those things to be out there and to have these discussions so that we can start slowly, more so, getting away from those mindsets, even the ones that are automatic for us that just aren't good.
Yeah, I mean, you make some absolutely fantastic points there. I mean, I think this is the first time for some reason I've ever said boy when talking about that child. I don't know why. Like you said, it's an automatic thing for someone, and it's not even. I didn't even mean to do it, but it was just almost an
We all
assumption.
do it, right?
Especially
Yeah,
since I've got a 9-month-old daughter, so I should probably be thinking girl automatically as well. So, but yeah, what you're saying about Bix is important as well, because I thought they almost could have set up a fantastic story for her, because I can understand that, this is the first episode of the season. It's a year after the Ferrex uprising, and she's still suffering PTSD from the trauma she went through there, and I can get on board with that. And then you add on extra trauma of potentially being assaulted by an Imperial officer, and that adds on to the PTSD she's already got in another sense. And then you could have taken that on and made her into such a strong storyline for her for this season, in showing how she comes back from that, how she deals with that. Yep, she can have those around her to support her as well, because you still need a support network. But obviously making it as a tool for Cassian's character to move forward, when Cassian didn't even get that much development this season anyway, when you could have had Bix, who has been a well-written character for the most part through season 1 and parts of season 2, and then to just use it as a tool, like you said, to not progress her and to use it for someone else was disappointing, because they could have taken everything that happened in the first couple of episodes of this season and turned that into such a strong story of like another person who has been through really bad shit and has the mental fortitude to come through it because of hope that they have, that they can make the galaxy better, they can make it better for themselves with the support of those around them, and made that a strong mental health story for women and for everyone that goes through it anyway, because it's important that women get that message through, but it's important that people on my side of it realize that story as well and get to hear it and get to then go, well, we can be the ones like Cassian and Luthen or whoever supporting Bix through this. We can do that ourselves for the other people in our lives. And so I thought it was really bad that they didn't give her a stronger storyline for this season. I had made the predictions that I thought she was going to get killed off by the end of the season. I didn't see, but okay, having her leave is just another way of doing that, really, in a way.
It is, yeah.
So I was just thinking that maybe the way that they draw Cassian to fully be committed to the rebellion was getting her killed by the Empire, rather than her just going, I believe in the Force healer, that you've got a destiny here and you can't fulfill that if we're together, sort of thing. Because that's a bit cliche in itself as well, isn't it? Like the whole, you can't fulfill your destiny because you want to be here with me, so I'm going to have to leave to make sure you do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of messages to sort of pick apart, and I think it's important to kind of sit with these things and say, what is the message I am getting? What is the message the audience is getting from these decisions? And some of the messages I got from this season were amazing and wonderful, and everyone needs to hear them. And some of the messages I got were not good and were things that I think could be better. And so I think it's important to talk about them. And I'm glad you brought up mental health. Star Wars could use some improvement in how they deal with mental health issues. And a lot of the time, the only way they've dealt with it is, well, congrats on being redeemed, you're dead. And that's how you solve your mental health problems. So I mean, I'm glad they didn't kill her. But I think there's obviously still room for improvement with how we tell those stories, especially for women. But in general, everybody deals with mental health issues. And I hope we improve on that in Star Wars going forward. But
I mean, is that a future that Star Wars needs now, in terms of you can still tell light-hearted stories of Star Wars, the bits where you don't have to necessarily go into it too deeply on that level, but when you're doing it with a TV series where you're spending time on these characters and every week is a film's worth of information, like it has been for season 2 of Andor, you then need to have the time to go into that darker side of things, not just in terms of like the Star Wars universe, but in life itself and how we deal with that, because you need to see it reflected in the material that you watch. And that's what gives some people hope, in the fact that people that are really into this, like into Star Wars or Marvel or DC, whatever you're really into, and if you're going through stuff, you want to see that reflected in the characters and how they deal with it, and then that gives you personal hope of how to then get out of it yourself, doesn't it? So but people always say Star Wars is, or some people always say Star Wars is made for kids, because that's what George Lucas said. I've never believed it's just for kids. If you ever watch Clone Wars, that shit says 6+ on Disney Plus, but that is all about politics and death. That's not for kids.
It is, yeah. And, it's funny too because I think people forget that kids deal with some of these adult problems in the real world because unfortunately that's the world we live in and where kids are being exposed to terrible things and are having mental health problems. And I think as a kid for me who was going through that, it would have been so important for me to see good stories about that growing up in the Star Wars universe and a universe that I love. And so even for kids, I think they need to see some of these darker things, and the way it's portrayed on screen can determine whether it's, for adults or for kids. But I think the actual messaging of it is for everybody. And yeah, it's interesting.
I just think it is just generally part of the evolution of society, and the fact that you can, like I said, you can have stuff that you can glaze over and make it lighthearted because some of the films need to just be that because it's about like a certain story with Star Wars in terms of good versus evil, but you don't want to get like in the main films they're not going to dive too much into that side of it. Like the series give you a better opportunity, but modern day society where representation for all sides is super important, not just for the straight white man, in all sides of it. For women, for diverse groups, for underrepresented groups in all. But it's important that you do get that nowadays. So you can have your films and stuff like this where it's not too serious, and then you can have your series where you can dive into it more and make the representation of mental health or of diverse groups or anything like that a serious point where it can be addressed. Like, I don't know how much of a Marvel fan you are. We haven't really chatted ever about Marvel because we're obviously with Star Wars people. We've obviously got like Ironheart coming out next month, and like already the things on there, like people commenting going, "I bet there's a scene where she's confronted by two white policemen," and it's just like, so what if she is? That's about representation of what they go through. And they have to deal with it, and therefore it's important, especially with Ryan Coogler doing it as well, being like an executive producer. Yeah, if there's scenes in there, who cares? In terms of like, from my point of view, if that's in there and it's representing what she goes through or what someone of that ethnicity goes through on a personal level, put that scene in there so we can see it. There's no reason why you can't do it. It doesn't have to all be light-hearted jokes, and guns and lightsabers and shit. So.
Yeah, and it can be some of those things, but we do need to have everybody represented in that too, right? It can't just be white dudes waving sabers around. It can still be lighthearted and fun and represent people. And I think the main thing I've noticed with the Star Wars fandom that I would love to change, and I hope does change, is, and this is a human problem, it's not a Star Wars fan problem, but we all exist in these very egotistical bubbles, right? Where the world revolves around us and what we like. And if I don't like Taylor Swift, it's because she's bad. And it's like, that's just an example, but I don't mean she's not bad at all. But just because something is not your thing or something doesn't speak to you, it doesn't mean it's inherently bad, right? And so I hope that we get away from that mindset, because when people see stories that aren't about them, it causes this defensive reaction, of, well, that's going to be woke or that's going to be bad because I don't relate to it. And I really hope we get away from that, because Star Wars really is for everybody. And I love how much more content we've gotten in the past, particularly decade, because now we have more room to tell these other stories that may speak to someone but not speak to me. And that's okay. And I hope we get to a place where we're all okay with not everything being something for me,
Yeah, absolutely. So Andor's now come to its end. Incredible the fact that these last 5 episodes, it's the first TV show in history to have 5 consecutive episodes rated 9.5 or above.
That's really cool for Star Wars.
It's really cool. I don't really think that like every episode of the last 5 you could rate as a 9.5 or above. Like, I'm talking about the final 3, like episodes 8 and 9. Yes, I'd rate them like pretty damn high. These I'd rate some of them high, but I'm not super high. I mean, it's good that we've got that. Where do you rate Andor in terms of Star Wars greatness then? Because to me, both series have had the same thing where it's been slow to start with. It's not been the most engaging and an amazing thing, but it turns into something great by the end of it. And sometimes you then have to take everything into account. You can't just say the second half was great, the first half was boring, and then give it like a middle rating because of that. You have to take the whole journey. Because like I was like, especially this season, like episodes 1 to 3, I was like, this is boring as fuck. I didn't need 3 episodes about a wedding or Andor being trapped on like Yavin 4 in a forest. Like, this was all boring. And then you see some of it come together, and then it completes the story by the end of it. So in terms of Star Wars greatness, because I made a point, I was guesting on someone else's podcast yesterday, and I made the point of, you can rate Andor really highly because of how well written it's done, how well acted it's done, and the fact it's like setting up to support the main bit of Star Wars as a whole. But the best moments of all of Star Wars will always be when there's a lightsaber or a Force user involved, because that's essentially what the main Star Wars story is. Good versus evil. You can have the nitty gritty underneath, the stuff that gets you to that point, but the greatest moments in Star Wars will always come from a lightsaber or Force user rather than something like this. It can still be considered great, but it's never going to be the top of the pile. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask, like, rating wise, are we talking like my personal fulfillment of this show or how I think it fits into the Star Wars universe? Because those are two different numbers.
Yeah, fair.
Those.
We'll go with the latter in terms of like if you had every Star Wars project lined up against each other, where do you put this in? Is it top 3? Is it top 5? Or it does not even make top 10 because like other bits take priority over setting something up, like because this is just a setup for Rogue One, which is a setup for the original trilogy. So it's like, you know, the prequel to New Hope is now a prequel to Rogue One, which is, you know, so it's a setup really of a show of a character that we always knew the fate of. So where do you personally put it in? If you ranked every Star Wars project, where do you see it fitting in?
I hope people don't get so mad at me. But just because it's my personal opinion only, I would rate it right in the middle of the pack, I think I would say. I think there are some things in there that are just so important to Star Wars, especially Mon Mothma's story. I could watch just a show about Mon Mothma and how she sort of went through this evolution of hiding what she was doing to having to be sort of at the forefront of it. Love that storyline. So I do think there are so many important parts of this, but I do agree, like in terms of necessity, we already did know what was happening after this. I personally knew the Empire was bad. Apparently some people didn't know that. And so maybe it was important that we said that, but I thought that was very obvious, but maybe not. So just for me personally, it was middle of the pack. I understand why people will rate it higher. I've seen a lot of people say like best Star Wars I've ever seen and all that. And that only makes me happy. Like I don't agree, but it makes me happy to see people so much enjoy Star Wars. So even though I'm rating it middle, you know, of the pack, I don't mean it to say it's not great and it's not important. It's just not as much for me as stories like with lightsabers and with Jedi and with Sith. And I just lean more towards loving that part of Star Wars. And I think that's okay too.
Yeah. Do you rate it as the best Star Wars TV show? Because I kind of think... Fair. I was going to say, because I think the debate, a lot of people are saying obviously it is. And I still think Mandalorian sneaks above it. For me personally, I mean, if you include the big TV series, so let's just go through. So we've got Acolyte, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka. Obviously, we know we've still got another season of Ahsoka to come. Mandalorian, Andor, Rebels, Clone Wars are the big ones. They would what I would say are the big 7 for the TV shows. Resistance isn't even worth getting off the bottom of my shoe for. I know a lot of people agree, to be fair. So, and obviously other things that are just like little side things here and there. But those are the big 7 shows for me. So I've always said that the singular best season of Star Wars TV is season 2 of Mandalorian, because obviously the ending as well, with Luke Skywalker showing up, is the best ending to a series, I think, for Star Wars I've seen anyway. I think people put too much into season 7 of Clone Wars in terms of how good it was. Like, to me, I've always grumbled that it focuses too much on Ahsoka. It's like the ending of the whole of Clone Wars, and you spend 4 episodes on Ahsoka. Which, to me, I was like, I wanted to see a bit more wider stuff going on with the clones, really leading up to Order 66. And then people are saying, because of, like, the political side of it, the fact that this is setting up the rebellion, and giving all that backstory to it all, this puts it above the mission of the week stuff that Mandalorian gives you. So do you agree, disagree? Because you said no pretty quickly when I said, is it above Mando?
No. For me, it's more towards the bottom of the Star Wars TV list, but again, that is just my interpretation of how I enjoyed it and the things that I like about Star Wars just didn't exist as much in this show. So things like Mandalorian, which ties so heavily into the stories that are coming up, especially it's tying a lot into the sequels. It's wrapping up things from the original trilogy. I really like that aspect of it. I don't think everything needs to connect. I'm not one of those people, so it's not that I don't enjoy separated stories. It's just for Star Wars in particular, Andor wasn't the type of story I'm most interested in as an individual. So I would rate most of the Star Wars TV shows over Andor, and I know that's a hot take, and that's okay because I don't expect other people to agree, and that's fine because like everybody interprets things differently, and everybody has different life experiences and personalities that make them take in art in different ways. So I have a lot of respect for people who think this is the best thing that's ever happened in Star Wars. I just don't happen to feel that way.
Fair enough, fair. No, it's all subjective and where you personally rate it over, like we said, something like even Rebels, for example, that's just, it's about the Jedi and even that's got its own hints of forming the rebellion in it. So, in a way, so that's absolutely fine. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I would have it middle of the pack probably for me, rather than like being absolute top, because again, when you look at the story in a whole, fantastic, but even then, like I said, the first half of each series is a bit too slow. If it was action packed or amazing from like episode 1 onwards, like you would be at the absolute top. But one last question for you, and this is the conversation I had with someone, so I wanted to put it to a big Star Wars person to see how you would feel about it. So you've got someone that's never seen any Star Wars. They don't know the big reveal about Vader and Luke. They just know it's a story.
I know what you're going to ask already.
It's good versus evil. That's all they know it is, and they want to start off watching Star Wars. There's always been debate: do you go chronological order? Do you go release order? So you do original trilogy first, so you get the big reveal. Blah blah blah. But what I want to know now is, would you start off with Andor season 1 and let them all the build up, and then hit them with the, considering Rogue One and even A New Hope do hit a bit different now that you've got this backstory of the rebellion to it? So do you start off with Andor season 1, because you don't need to have any backstory to these characters? You just go in and you go, okay, there's an empire that rules the galaxy. They're fucking awful, because there's no Palpatine or Vader either, so you don't get those reveals. And so you start off there, and you see the build up and the setup of this rebellion being done, and the sacrifices that the people around the galaxy are having to make to get the rebellion up and running and get it moving. And then how bad the empire genuinely are when you get to things like the Gorman massacre, which. If you start off with A New Hope, you don't get that. You just got like these faceless white troopers to show up with a black dildo and they start killing people. Whereas if you go from Andor season 1 and 2, and then you go into Rogue One and you go, oh shit, okay, they've got this massive super weapon that can fucking destroy planets. And then your first introduction to Vader really is you seeing Force choking out a colleague before absolutely dominating a hallway of rebels. And then go into the original trilogy where you get the main story. So that's the question: is where would you start someone off now? Do you start them off bang with A New Hope and let them get the prequels done, and then go, okay, this is the backstory to the original trilogy and how the rebellion started, or do you let it build up from there and build up the tension going to the original trilogy?
I'm gonna make everyone so mad. It's fine. It's too late. But I'm a chronological person. And this isn't a reference to adults who are new to Star Wars. As a kid, I obviously didn't watch it in chronological order because that didn't exist. So I think if you're a child just being introduced to Star Wars, I understand the concept of starting 4, 5, 6 and then going back. I totally get it. If you're an adult who's never seen Star Wars, I would tell people to start from the beginning and go chronologically. So in this example, I would say Andor season 1 to Rogue One, New Hope, whatever. To me, that just makes sense. I know there's some reveal that might get spoiled, but at the same time, there's some things that will also be reversed in terms of reveals. So you'll get your own special reveals by watching it chronologically. They'll just be different ones from watching it in release order. So that's just my opinion on it. I know a lot of people hold true to you gotta watch it in release order, and that's fine too. But
I don't know. I just think it poses an interesting question now because we start getting all these gaps filled in between all the films and stuff like that with all these series and different things we're getting now. It poses just an interesting question of where would you start someone off? And, building up the story of the rebellion first, does that hit different going into the trilogy? Does it take away the impact of the original story? Because it makes it more about the rebellion and the sacrifice that people have got to do to go up against the Empire before you introduce some magic kid and this old guy that just want to somehow easily take things down. So, it does change the. I think it would change the perspective of the original trilogy if you showed Andor and Rogue One first. At the same time, I think the build up of like introducing Vader and obviously Palpatine throughout the original trilogy hits different if you do start with Andor. Because, like I said, you get Vader, and you're just like, okay, so Krennic's gone off to see this dude who's dressed in all black and is only half a body, and he just force chokes him, okay, and then you see him just show up at the end and decimate these rebels. And so, when you then get to A New Hope, you're like, oh, okay, Vader's chased down this ship. And of course, like, he could have walked in first ahead of the stormtroopers and killed all these dudes. So it's like, it's just you have to offset things, I think, and it does change the dynamic, I think, of the original trilogy more than a lot of people would want it to, probably. So, it's an interesting one. I don't know which way I would go, to be honest. I'm asking people about it, and I don't know which way I go. I think I'd maybe want to start off with Andor, maybe do a controlled experiment. Two people that have never seen Star Wars, separate rooms. One starts off with the original trilogy, one starts off with Andor, and just see then how they view Star Wars as a whole.
Yeah, I think that would be super
interesting social experiment. Maybe I'll kidnap a few people and try.
I think that would be super cool. I always view it as the Clone Wars argument, right? Where for some people the prequels were terrible, and that's fine. I was 10 when they came out, so I thought they were the best thing. But as an adult, if you go watch the Clone Wars, it suddenly makes the prequels even better, for you, or if you hated them before, it might make you like them better. So I kind of view everything in Star Wars that way, where I'm like, the High Republic novels made me appreciate the Acolyte a lot, and whatever Rebels made me appreciate that. There's always something that's going to lead to the next thing, and so I think for me, besides ruining the element of surprise for a few things, I enjoy having all this fun context before moving on to the next chronological things. It just makes my love for it bigger, but everyone's different.
That's fair. Just finally then, give your own personal rating out of 10 for Andor as a whole. I gave it an 8.6.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm pretty harsh with my ratings normally because I think people give too high numbers too easily. It's just people giving 8s, 9s, and above. That's almost like hitting the perfect range, which to me is absurd because nothing is ever that good, or rarely comes close to being that good. So an 8.6 for me is quite high as a rating. So
I'm the kind of person you hate because I just want to rate everything Star Wars a 10 because. I'm going to find something I love about everything. I'm working on it in time. So I'm going to try really hard to give an honest rating. I think for me, I would rate it as like a 6.
You say 6?
I know it seems harsh.
Wow.
But again, I'm sorry. I know that's a very hot take. But again, it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it or that I think a 6 means it's bad.
It's technically above average. If 5 is bang smack in the middle average, as it should be on a rating scale of 1 to 10, then 6 is above average. So it's not you saying it's bad. It's just you personally didn't think it was like top or below average. So it's okay.
Well, honestly, in my perfect world, if I wasn't trying to be honest, I would just rate everything exactly the same and be like, there's something in each of these that's a 10 for me. Because it's true, there's stuff in Rogue One or in Andor that are absolute 10s for me. So that would be my preference for how I rate things, is just to never do it. But since I'm trying to be a normal human being and allow criticism sometimes, I guess, and I will put it at a 6.
So I'll clip where you said it gave it a 6 out of 10. I'll put it on TikTok and be like, kill her now. Just
oh my god, I will. I will never emerge from my apartment ever again.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna make that edit now. I'll just be like Palpatine, and he's like, kill them now. No,
Can you
I
at
won't.
least
Don't
give
worry.
me like Force Lightning or something when you say it?
I'll give you a lightsaber to defend yourself. It's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Jen, I absolutely massively appreciate you jumping on this lovely Sunday to chat all things Andor series finale. It's been absolutely amazing to have a chat with you and have you back on the show. Absolutely loved it.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Good that you didn't get disrupted by your Wi-Fi this time as well, because last time you were on, you disappeared a few times and came back. And but lovely to have you on. I'm just sorry that Rachel unfortunately had to miss it. Big shout out to Rachel.
I know,
the
it was
other half.
fun to miss it.
But tell everybody at home exactly where we can find the Bitches of Dathomir podcast and your social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Bitches of Dathomir Podcast. So we love interacting with you online. I'm a definite comment farmer, so please come comment with me on things. I love it. Or you can shoot us an email via dathomir@gmail.com. And we're everywhere you find your podcast. We're going to be the only one named Bitches of Dathomir, so we're not hard to find.
Threads as well. Is there anyone still using Threads right now?
Okay, weirdly, yes. The algorithm is terrible. I will say, if you're trying to like really get engagement, Threads is not for you. If you're trying to sort of escape the horrendousness of some of the other social medias, Threads is kind of nice because they're so beautiful. It's not.
It's all right. Have you heard of Blue Sky? So like the Twitter alternative.
I have heard of Blue Sky.
I set up a profile for the podcast on Blue Sky, made like one post, and then forget it's ever existed. Even when I run my banner saying where you can find the podcast, it's not even on there because I forget to put it on there. That's how much I forget and don't care about Blue Sky. So it's absolutely hilarious that I made it and just go, no, I don't even remember it now. I didn't even touch Threads either. I was just like, for me, I thought it died about 3 days after it came out. So
I mean, it kind of did, honestly, but I'm enjoying it.
But I don't even have a Twitter or X, to be fair, for the show, because I was like, this.
No, we got rid of that. Yeah.
I just stick to I've got a Facebook one, but it's about as pointless as my insulin tablets, to be fair. So, so Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, that's where it's at for all of us, to be fair. So make sure getting on there, following the Bitches of Dathomir. They've got a fantastic show, lots of High Republic content as well, because that's what they specialize in. So if you want to get into that area that just adds more to Star Wars as a whole, it's definitely worth getting into. Amazing, Jen. Thank you so much. I'm going to be taking a little break, everyone, for a few weeks after this. Once this episode is now out, I need a bit of a break. It's been a hectic last sort of 6-7 weeks for the podcast. I've been pumping out 2 or 3 episodes a week because of various things going on, lots of guest appearances. I need a little bit of a break because there's not... I thought Andor was going to be 12 weeks. I thought I was going to be covering Andor for 3 months. And then it was 4 weeks. And so... thankfully, my schedule has a nice empty chunk in it now because I thought that was going to be Andor instead. So I'm going to have a little break for a few weeks. I'll be back sort of in about a month's time, just before Ironheart comes out. Nice to see a trailer's finally dropped for that, and we got a little bit of Marvel promo for it, thank God, because it was fucking dead otherwise. Obviously, Superman trailers dropped. You can hear me chatting with Lee on Let's Come Around yesterday about that, if you want to go and check that out, because we had a massive diversion from talking about Andor to talking about Superman, and a bit of audience participation in the comments as well about it. So, yeah, I'll be back in a few weeks' time. Obviously, I'll keep you updated on social media when I'll be back, but just for 3 or 4 weeks, just to have a little bit of a break and a little bit of a chill out. But of course, everyone, thank you for tuning in, and as always...
the Force will be with you, always.
Thanks for tuning in to the Galactic Core Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But until next time, go get your geek on.